The collective prided itself on one principle above all: never underestimate an opponent. Across 500,000 cycles and over 600,000 wars, we had experienced the entire spectrum of warfare, from the sweet taste of lightning-fast victory to the bitter depths of soul-crushing defeat. Each conflict left its mark, teaching us the invaluable lesson that every adversary, no matter how insignificant they might appear, deserves respect. So when we stumbled upon a small, fractious world teeming with life and ruled by a single species that had yet to master interplanetary travel, we suppressed any temptation to dismiss them as inconsequential. We treated them with the same caution we would reserve for the Romagen of Volmahal, a foe known for their ferocity and cunning. Our surveillance quickly revealed a species driven by aggression, fragmented into hundreds of disparate political factions, speaking dozens of languages, and with a long history of primitive warfare. We calculated that they would resist our onslaught for mere reams before succumbing. Yet, we prepared for a challenging battle all the same. In retrospect, this is where our first mistake was made, a mistake rooted in paradox. We overestimated them. This miscalculation set off a chain of events that would spiral out of control. It was, in their own words, our original sin. The records of the operation against this planet are available for study. In summary, it was a textbook example of a small-scale cleansing. Command was entrusted to a legate of the Fourth Worlds, who followed standard procedure. Recognizing that the planet did not warrant complete annihilation, he wisely chose to forego heavy weapons, opting instead for a light bombardment with mass drivers. 4 asteroids were needed to effectively destroy the main population centers, as you can see. Notice how this strike here caused this entire tectonic plate to erupt. That was intentional. The earthquakes and destruction caused by this strike destroyed habitations across the other side of this ocean. These were one coast of a large, powerful faction, the most dominant military power on the planet at the time, which we had specifically targeted with a separate asteroid strike here on its east coast also. Between the strike and the seismic activity, this faction was destroyed, effectively ending any chance of organized resistance. The other 3 strikes targeted mass population centers around the main continent, leaving the southern hemisphere mostly untouched. We allowed a few cycles to pass for dust and debris to begin to clear the atmosphere before we began landing. The survivors were still trying desperately to aid each other. Destroying their communications and any device capable of flight was done within a few sheem, and conquest of the planet was completed by remote legions within 9 reams. Of course there had been resistance, but the legions had been programmed to kill quickly, and we destroyed all who fought against us. The combined death toll of the asteroid strikes and legionary subjugation accounted for about 90% of the dominant species population. Subjugation completed, the legate passed control over to the first proctor, Javelis of the Hue cluster, and he ran the planet now designated a resource world. Within 8 cycles the atmospheric disruption caused by the asteroid strikes ended. The planet became known for its abundant water, exciting and varied plant life, the sheer biodiversity of its oceans, and entertaining hunting. Large-scale colonization did not take place as probe ships encountered a satellite of one of the system's gas giants containing abundant fuel for D-class ships below its icy surface. Javelis correctly ascertained the value of this resource, and 7 large stations were erected to mine it. This became the main collective center for the system. He did, however, name this complex using the title the indigenous species of the newly conquered planet had given this moon. This is why it was called Europa Station, and why the species we talk about has incorrectly been called Europans by many. Allow me say this is incorrect. The name of the species is human. Interestingly enough, the name European was a term given to members of the human race who had lived upon one peninsula of their largest continent. Said peninsula had been the target of the largest asteroid strike and had been destroyed, but Europans refers to the name given to humans by the collective post-conquest, as that mining station became the only reason anyone even knew about the system for some centuries. Be that as it may, the planet we had conquered became designated as somewhere miners from Europa Station could relax on after a cycle on duty, and the collective created 4 resort settlements there, including New Red by Ocean, our main administrative hub, named by Proctor Javelis after a settlement on his home world. After 30 cycles Javelis retired, a proctor Fidel Pros was brought in, and he ran the system for an additional 20 cycles until he was replaced by Proctor Joser of the Impluvans. As an Impluvan myself, I can understand why Joser became inclined towards studying the surviving indigenous population. My species, as you know, values knowledge above all things, and here was a unique culture no one had bothered with. It was under Joser we began to study these humans, 58 cycles after conquest. They were fascinating, from an academic point of view. The collective had previously maintained a policy of keeping them at arm's reach and away from our settlements over the cycles, and aside from allowing miners hunt them in the wild, there had been little contact. Initial Impluvan studies and meetings, however, went well. We were bipeds like them and also had 2 arms, and this similarity of form seemed to make the arrival of our researchers less traumatic for them. Quickly we found they had reacted to the arrival of the collective with a deep-seated sense of shock. The loss of 90% of their population, the destruction of their civilization, and the occupation of their planet by beings of unimaginable power had changed these humans. First contact often does. You will remember from your case studies the Croxan species who committed mass suicide upon conquest by the collective during the Rialto era. We discovered the humans had been equally drastically changed, but in a much more constructive way. During the 58 cycles since we had arrived, the humans had sought each other out. We had mostly ignored them, aside from hunting parties for sport, and they had, in small communities, began traveling their world seeking out the remains of their peoples. And had united. In a way not seen in their own primitive history. Partly this unification had been based upon simply surviving the calamity. Partly it was based on sharing technologies with one another. Humans had used technology to improve their living conditions. Our invasion had destroyed much of that, so life expectancy had fallen drastically. And partly it was though a new religion. The latter 2 reasons excited the Impluvan researchers immensely. In the former, what they found was that humans had a natural ability to scavenge together what technology they could to replicate what they had before and, in some cases, even improve on it. This resourcefulness impressed my people. This species were natural tinkerers and engineers. They could adapt quickly, think around problems pragmatically, see solutions outside of logical thinking. It was this affinity towards learning that led to the first Impluvan human friendships. But it was their religion that caught our eye. It was unique in all of the collective. Humans had coped with our arrival through this religion. More than that, they had managed to find identity, hope, reason for being, behind a faith in a divine godlike figure. Represented by a holy symbol found in all human communities, the humans named it Reno. Reno was not the worship of the collective as we had seen a score of primitive cultures fall to. It was entirely centered on their own belief systems. Reno was a name given to a single all-powerful deity or concept. To the humans, Reno was the very essence of the universe itself. Their priests, who had become civic leaders within their communities, said Reno had ordained that all events, including the near destruction of their species, had taken place for a reason, and while humanity did not understand that reason yet, they accepted it and sought to fulfill the will of Reno. What intrigued Proctor Joser most was the way the humans had used religion in a way no species in the collective had ever seen before. Faith in Reno gave their shattered communities purpose. Faith in Reno pushed them to improve their technology. To stoically endure and learn. It wasn't just a reaction to some horrendous event in their past, however, but a foci for their future. As followers of Reno, humans became united, seeing themselves as part of a great cycle of destiny. One race, one language, one creed, one purpose. Notable amidst this time was the work of an Impluvan researcher called Canyonal, who postulated that the reason for this reaction lay in the deep psychology of human race itself. For tens of thousands of cycles, it appeared, humans had clung to primitive religious beliefs, all united by a single common theme. The gods of the human race were, almost universally, carnivores. Canyonal has come to this conclusion after spending 7 cycles living amidst the humans in a community called New Santiago. The residents were quite happy to talk about their history. He discovered that once humans had worshipped many gods, all separated by culture, distance, and time. But whatever name these gods took, primitive deities called Zeus, Odin, Kali, the plumed serpent, Yahweh, they had all demanded sacrifice. A sacrifice of blood. The humans therefore appeased their gods with blood. Their very deities were carnivorous. Why? Canino believed this was due to the fact that for much of their species' history they had suffered from predation. For tens of thousands of cycles humans had not been the dominant species on their planet. The number one cause of death for them had been being killed and eaten by predators. It made sense then that they would see their gods as predators, demanding sacrifice. Of course, developing sophistication of their civilizations would demand a more complex mode of worship eventually, and indeed one deity especially stands out: Christ. This was a god that didn't demand sacrifice but symbolically became the sacrifice. Canino noted, however, since the rise of the worship of Reno, the humans had rejected this Christ and were quite open about this. Indeed, they mentioned they had only taken one sentence from the teachings of this lost god unto their new faith. Be you therefore as wise as serpents and as gentle as doves. Serpents are an indigenous carnivorous animal found on the planet, while doves are a minor avian species. The traits of wisdom and gentleness the humans agreed were merely projections upon them. We had discovered the humans had reconciled the calamity upon them as a sacrifice to their new carnivorous god, Reno, and they simply sought to find what the meaning of this sacrifice was, humbly and patiently. The result of Canino's research, coupled with others, led Proctor Joser to decree that humans were allowed to enter New Red by ocean as a servitor race, to encourage their learning and to see what would follow. The results were spectacular. Humans became prefect mechanics for us. Their small size, coupled with the affinity for repair, and their desire to learn, plus their willingness to serve a greater purpose, meant we in Ploven found them a perfect servitor race. They bore no ill will, treated all with deferential respect and non-judgmental curiosity. They learned fast, and made themselves invaluable. Within 6 cycles we had granted them permission to work on the Europa stations, and even hard-line xenophobic species such as the Rodiga accepted them as a useful addition to the workforce. After Proctor Joser retired and the system came under Proctor Heat of the Sindians, we in Ploven continued to sponsor humans as a servitor race. We shared a natural affinity towards knowledge, found humans to be delightful students, always pushing themselves to know more, learn more, gather knowledge. Yes, they still clung to a primitive belief in a supernatural deity, but this made them passive, accepting, curious. It was their religious duty to learn gently about the universe. We came to see them as little cousins. It helped we were both bipedal, I suppose, but their priests taught the humans to accept all beings regardless of their size/shape as the same. It was 114 cycles after the conquest of their planet that the Implovans sponsored the humans to become designated a full servitor race of the collective. Not as strong as the Gasno, or as ferocious as the Croxan, or as nimble as the Hostin, we saw a species who would be ideal as mechanics, lab assistants, mild-mannered aides in scientific researches. Without fanfare or fuss they were accepted as servitors. For the next 186 cycles wherever we in Ploven went you would find humans, or Europans as many called them. Other species soon found them useful. The Sindians especially discovered the humans' willingness to learn their complex language to be surprising and responded with granting humans several tasks within their manufacturing plants. The deeply spiritual Omniscia found human belief to be rudimentary but worthy of respect. Humans did not deviate from their blind faith in Reno, but saw Omention's spirituality as equally worthy. Given how many of the collective disdained Omniscian beliefs, this made humans natural allies to this founder race, and the young species seemed honored to help Omniscian with their cloning technology, and even served on the sacred holy platforms that surrounded the planet Omnit. By 300 cycles after the conquest of their minor planet, the human race was a common sight all over the collective. They never ventured any opinion on political matters, never seemed to engage in any wider embrace of our culture. With the exception of deep song, humans adored the Sonirorian deep song, as aesthetically it appealed to them, something they clearly picked up from the Omniscians, but lived quietly around us. Humans had indeed become the model of a servitor race. Their insular communities were seen everywhere, marked with the symbol of their species, and who possessed a natural desire to serve any full collective race. We used them as examples to other servitor species, and indeed found they were perfect in this role as well. Human clerics would travel to other servitor worlds, and quickly the beliefs of Reno would spread there. Mostly in enclaves of faith, but the Hostan especially became devout followers of Reno almost as a species embracing their own version of this religion. This had a profound upon the collective. Immediately the Hostan became more compliant. Indeed, theft of materials, always a hallmark of Hostan service, actually ceased within a 14 reams of the Hostan becoming followers of Reno. Croxan followers of Reno ceased killing themselves, the number one cause of death of their race, and always the humans quietly thanked us for whatever praise we gave them for these changes, never seeking reward, always humbly saying it was the will of Reno. The humans became the ideal compliant species. There was even a small colony of humans serving the Presidium itself, living on board the White Nova, deep in the bowels of the ship, charged with helping maintain electrical/magnetic systems. All was well. And then came the fall. It began when a series of 4 symbols had appeared across the collective communications networks. The symbols were broadcast for a mere 6 items only, but had appeared on all communications relays, including military ones. Instantly investigations began. We could find no point of origin. The symbols had been generated from within our own systems. Someone had used our communication networks against us. Who? At first we had no idea. We did, however, recognize one of the icons immediately. The symbol of humanity. But it appeared alongside 3 others, and the full message went as follows. Human holy symbols. By the time we sought out the humans to explain, it was too late. Much later, interrogating human prisoners, we discovered the symbols were part of a language that had been used by one of their cultures. A culture that had been all but wiped out during the invasion. Obliterated in a second by asteroid strike, the 4 symbols had been used as a reminder of that lost language, that lost nation, that lost culture. The 4 symbols spelt out the name of the human god. A name the humans had shortened and we had heard only as Reno. That was not the word sent out across the galaxy. The word itself was the full name of their god. The word was genocide. You see, they worshipped genocide. Their god was the personification of all the pain they had suffered at our hands and all the fury they had towards us. Did they actually believe in a god named Reno? Or did they use the trappings of faith just to make sense of the universe and articulate their reaction to it? Did they realize that religion was the tool they had used to build up their civilizations in the first place, and cynically used it to distill what had been lost? We will never know. We did not see them for what they were. We had not seen that behind their passive faith was a deep-seated need for vengeance. That the trauma of losing 90% of their species had filled humans with the utter hatred of the collective. That this was a species who used religion however they wished, and had taken it to fashion a weapon against us all. We had never encountered a religion whose sole purpose was revenge. Or how religion could sustain that desire, give a species meaning and focus for centuries. It was why they had served so politely for hundreds of cycles. How they had endured being around us. It was their faith, you see. Every smile they had given us was fake. Every kind word was merely a lie, designed to fulfill their divine purpose. We had destroyed their world. Looking back, I realized that they probably never called their god Reno, merely used the very name to remind themselves of their purpose. They were as gentle as doves, as wise as serpents. And they gave unto us what we had given unto them, genocide. There will be a separate lecture on the fall in which we will go into some detail, so I will only summarize the main moments here. 12 Shem after the signal went out, the White Nova was destroyed from within, obliterating the Presidium in an instant. The collective lost all central authority. It was the start of a myriad of horror. The great shipyards of Enza saw automated defense systems turn upon our fleets, destroying them in moments. The sacred orbital platforms of the Omniscients plunged into the surface of their world, killing billions in huge explosions and irrevocable radiation. The remote servitors of at least 9 legions turned on their officers, killing them instantly and becoming for the humans a new fighting force which they remotely unleashed without hesitation on Fourth Worlds, Groxan, and even Helicoca. Humans sabotaged 26 jump gates, utterly destroying the systems by creating small singularities near populated worlds. The Sindians discovered their automated factories ceased working and then, sheems later, would explode as power plants erupted. Their atmosphere filled with toxic gases as humans followed up by causing hijacked spaceships piloted by suicidal members of their species to rain down upon the planet, targeting gatherings of survivors specifically. In Europa Station and indeed on thousands of other mining stations across the collective where humans had gone to work, complex life support systems suddenly turned off, killing hundreds of millions in an instant. Quickly the dozen main servitor races who had converted to Reno beliefs or had been influenced by Reno beliefs united with the humans. On hundreds of other worlds the collective servitor races fell upon us with utter savagery. The Croxan especially carried out thousands of suicidal attacks slaughtering hundreds of thousands of civilians across dozens of worlds. 86 humans burned the gestation chambers of the Heliento. 24 billion young Heliento had been consumed in flame and agony before the species' horrified eyes in a few moments. In a single stroke the humans had condemned the ancient Heliento to eventual extinction. Understand, the humans who unleashed these attacks? They did so either knowing we would kill them immediately afterwards or plain to include themselves amidst the dead. These humans did not fear death. They only feared not killing one of us before they died. If there was one race they were marginally more merciful to, it was we Implovan. Within a ream of the four-symbol message flickering across our communications networks, the central matrix of learning and knowledge be destroyed. In our haste to work out why the great data cores has been burned, we didn't notice that our orbital defense platforms had been deactivated. We didn't care, focused mostly on establishing how much knowledge had been backed up. But when a single hijacked Class D warship, controlled by humans and their hostile allies, appeared at the edge of our system, a mass driver already armed with a planet-destroying asteroid and pointing at us. Well, that got our attention. It was then the human priest who had led their community on Implov, a man named Bishop Carlitos, appeared before our leaders and thanked us for our aid in helping them facilitate their plan. By now communications had started filtering in images of horror and destruction. We realized that the humans were behind it all. Surrounded by heavily armed members of his species, the humans had butchered the honor guard of the Palace of Learning and stolen their weapons. The lore masters of the Implovan gazed in mute horror at Bishop Carlitos. He thanked us, on behalf of his species, for granting them access to the stars themselves, for sponsoring them, allowing and encouraging them to learn how, well, everything worked. Their revenge, he said, would not have been possible without us. Calmly, evenly, his voice barely suppressing disgust and hatred, he informed us that our reward would be that we Implovan alone would have warning of the doom to come. Calmly he said we would have one ream to evacuate as many survivors from our planet as possible before they fired the mass driver and sent that huge asteroid hurtling into our world. Like all the humans, he did not fear death. Indeed, he seemed honored to witness our destruction besides us. I have seen the recording of that meeting. The human priest had turned away from our horrified council members and then stopped, looked over his shoulder at our leaders, smiled and simply said, "Run." My parents managed to get me upon the last shuttle off Implov before the asteroid obliterated my homeworld. This one ream's warning was the only act of mercy they showed any of the collective during the fall. I will not labor the point. The records of the collective that we have managed to salvage over the last 80 cycles are incomplete, but contain a vast catalogue of atrocity and horror. It is only here, on former outlier worlds, located on the edge of the galaxy, that we have managed to regroup and rebuild. It is here that we plan now for the eventual moment that they find us. Despite the reassurances of the new Presidium, we know they will never stop looking for us. Never cease in their attacks. Even if it costs them everything. We never underestimate any enemy. But we never understood the implications of doing that. Until now. And therefore we train you to prepare for the war that is to come. A war against humans. So what do we know now that we did not know nearly 400 cycles ago? They are a species willing to die to enact even the smallest act of revenge. Possessing a fanatical faith wherein all believers burn with a righteous fury, where to sacrifice your own life to kill even one of us is considered the highest virtue. They are unified in a faith that tells them that any act of depravity, of hate, of fury is now sacred, provided it is done to us. They are a species who do not fear death if their belief system is strong enough. A species who have honored the traditions of their ancestors and worship a god who demands sacrifice and blood. Preferably our blood, but they will offer their own. Is it any wonder that races such as the Croxan embrace the human god so readily? Any wonder that this new faction, this crusade as it calls itself, burns brightly at the galactic core? We have been able to rebuild much here, but that is only because they and their fanatical allies have now taken time to slowly destroy any who survived the fall and the remains of the collective. They are, by all accounts, being systematic and precise. This is not wild hatred. Their religion gives their hatred purpose and direction. Their religion gives it structure and direction. It doesn't burn hot like a nova, but smolders, cold white, incinerating all it sees. When they obliterated our settlements on their home world, the humans made sure the galaxy witnessed the horror. They used the remnants of our communication relays to broadcast, in gruesome detail, the slow, methodical extermination of every non-human being. They wanted us to see. They wanted us to understand. This is the price we pay for our original sin. As for the future? Mercy is no longer an option. The humans are coming. Their arrival is inevitable. We must be prepared to face them, and if we cannot defeat them, we must follow their final command. And run.